Hello everyone from the Melek'le Yemek channel. Today's recipe is all about making sourdough bread without any extra feeding or waiting. We mix the dough in the evening and by morning our sourdough is ready. Enjoy the recipe and happy cooking. For this, as always, when you make yogurt at home, you'll notice that there's some yogurt at the bottom of the pot and a bit along the edges that's dried a little. Because it's got that thicker bottom, it ends up both runny and slightly thick. I don't add any water or turn it into iron, I just use it as is. If you like, add a tiny pinch of salt using the tip of a teaspoon, seal it and let it sit in the warmest spot in your kitchen. While it's in that warm spot, I go by and stir it occasionally. By the way, I was actually planning to use it after 7 days, but believe it or not, I left it aside and forgot. So here you see my homemade yogurt after 10 days, bubbling as if I'd added a bit of vinegar or baking soda. But for this recipe, you absolutely must use well-fermented homemade yogurt. For that, I use 4 bowls of flour, using my regular soup bowl size, and 1 spoonful of salt. As you can see, as I stir in the well-fermented yogurt, it starts to foam nicely. In my hometown, Maraş, during spring, we let tarhana yogurt and ayran ferment. The sourness is just like that. I also have 1½ cups of fresh whey or curdled milk water that I use as a backup. And let me tell you, I don't use plain water, though if your yogurt is very sour, any liquid will work fine. Now, I used 1½ cups of whey and a bit over 2 cups of sour yogurt to make a soft dough. I mixed in 4 cups of flour and just enough salt. Then added a bit of water along the edges so the dough doesn't stick. This method helps it rise nicely. I then seal the mixture in a glass jar, wrap it in a blanket because it's winter, and let it ferment overnight, from about 8 p.m. to 9 a.m., roughly 12 to 13 hours. By the end, the dough is full of large, airy holes. And remember, we don't feed it further. We simply let our yogurt do its thing in the warmest spot. Now, I wet my hands thoroughly to prevent the dough from sticking, and just look at how beautifully it has risen, so soft, airy, and full of life. It's got that perfect texture exactly how we want it. If you let it sit too long, your dough might spoil, or on a very hot day, it could become active in just 6 hours. But here in my cool winter setting, it ferments perfectly in 12 to 13 hours. I'm not doing any folding, I'll just place it directly onto a baking tray, give it a final rise and then bake it. And that's it, dear friends. Your sourdough is ready. I didn't invent this method myself. Back in my village, we used our sour yogurt and ayran, what we called kömbe, to make our own bread on the stove each morning. And by the way, the yogurt I used for the sourdough is homemade, not the store-bought pasteurized kind made with pasteurized milk. It's made from raw cow's milk. I even let a tray of it sit for 2½ hours. After 2½ hours, as you can see, it has risen beautifully. This is how the dough looked after I placed it on the tray. I then baked it in a 180 degrees Celsius oven, preheated 10 minutes earlier until it reached the perfect golden color, and then I took the bread out. Right now my bread is still firm. I cover it with a towel and a tablecloth so it can rest for an hour or 2 before cutting. If you cut it immediately, the knife will tear the dough, which happens with all yeast breads. My dark baking tray tends to overbrown the bottom a bit, but the top comes out with just the right color. When cutting warm baked goods, whether by hand or with a knife, sometimes the edge can become more dough-like. As you can see, I've sliced it. It's as soft as a sponge, and we made it without any extra feeding and as healthily as possible. Some of you might ask if you can make pastries or simit with this dough. Unfortunately, we can't achieve the right consistency because those recipes include extra fat or sugar, so the performance isn't the same. But if you'd like to experiment, feel free to try. That's our recipe, as simple as it gets. If any part of it isn't clear, leave a comment below and I'll help as best I can. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.